Can a Dinosaur King reboot work? Now, a few days ago, I made this tweet basically saying that out of any TV show to get a revival, I would pick Dinosaur King to bring back, and a lot of you seem to have agreed, far more than I was expecting, so today I thought I'd dive into this topic more and have a little bit of fun by going over what I think a Dinosaur King reboot would need to do in order to be successful, and most of all, does this series even deserve a reboot in the first place? Now, just know that when I talk about this, it's gonna be separate from my Dinosaur King remake. That one is more so my own personal interpretation of this franchise, and if you want to check them out, I'll leave a link to them in the description of this video. But without any further ado, let's get into discussing whether Dinosaur King deserves a reboot. However, let's get one thing clear right off the bat, peeps, that being the difference between a remake and a reboot. Because despite them being very similar, there is indeed a difference here. A remake essentially is when something will take inspiration from an original source and try to create a new story based off that, essentially reworking what came before to make something new, as you are remaking something. But a reboot is where something is basically jump-started up again from being dormant. So for this, we're going to be assuming it's a reboot and not a remake, because as I've said, I've already got that covered because Sega are cowards. Now, in order to properly figure out how to reboot it, we first need to understand what went wrong in the first place, where did the original series struggle, and how do we fix that? Well, as someone who's basically an expert on Dinosaur King at this point, I think it's safe to say that a big reason why Dinosaur King struggled to take off was the competition it had. Being in the early 2000s, Dinosaur King had some severe competition. Stuff like Digimon. Yep, just Digimon. There was nothing else. Yeah, there's pretty much no avoiding it. Every time this franchise gets brought up, it's pretty much guaranteed to get compared to Pokemon. And you know, rightfully so. They are both very similar in concept, plus, just like Pokemon, Dinosaur King started out as a game series, that being an arcade game or a DS game, that eventually got adapted into an anime in order to promote the games, in hopes of capturing a similar success to what Pokemon received. Look, I love this series as much as the next Paleo Nerd, but Sega weren't even trying to hide their blatant copying of Nintendo here. So as you could imagine, trying to have this series stand out on its own during the height of the Pokemon popularity was just a recipe for disaster. As simply put, you don't compete with Pokemon. It just won't ever work. Don't do it. So how do we fix this? Well, it's actually quite simple. A reboot would need to have more of its own identity. Have different adventures, have differing characters, maybe shake things up a bit with the Alpha Gang to make them more unique, or even experiment more with the D-Team. There is a lot of room to play around with here, and it wouldn't be all that hard in order to do so, as after all, once you get past the first few episodes in Dinosaur King, it becomes very different to Pokemon in a few ways. So not only would diversifying it help it stand out, but it would also breathe room for new fans to get invested in something fresher. But being a Pokemon rival was far from this series' only issues, as it had stuff like awkward dialogue, rushed or underdeveloped arcs, and really choppy animation. I swear the animation looks so much better when I was a kid. So in order to fix these issues, I'd say that this reboot would need to be more self-contained. Start off small so you can use your time wisely, as well as streamline all the needless junk that slow it down. The way I do it would be starting off with one season being around 10 episodes long, and within these 10 episodes it would cover the introduction of the characters, dinosaurs, and the story, as well as keeping the Alpha Gang and Dr. Z as the main antagonists, with this season eventually ending around Captured at Zeta Point arc, with hints towards Seth's more malicious intent for the future. This way, you not only have a solid introduction into the world, but you set the stage for far more extreme stuff to come into later seasons. which for those of you curious as to how I would structure the entirety of Season 1, it would be more like this across 3 separate seasons, as I feel like there's enough content in the first season to stretch out this much. Now hold on peeps, do you want to be featured in a video? Just like Light Block Vids, Awesome Ocelot, and The Sun Gaming? Then you need to subscribe right now. I'm on a mission to get to 20,000 subscribers and I need your help in order to reach that goal. So, if you want to help me on my mission and potentially get a shout out, then you need to subscribe right now. And comment down below telling me you subscribed, and who knows, it might just be your name that's the one featured in the very next video. But with that, let's get back into Dinosaur King. Now, I know all of you are asking this, but would the reboot need to have realistic dinosaur designs? Well, no. Kind of. You see, I actually think there should be a balance between realistic designs and more anime-inspired designs. Like, keeping the chibi forms as cartoonish caricatures would make sense, but maybe have the stylized modern designs with a few creative liberties when it comes to the adult forms, just so they can still have personality despite being modernized. And in terms of how they'd portrayed, I do really like the idea of having them be CGI models again, but it would need to be updated quite a bit. Whether they make it fully cel-shaded or hyper-detailed, I just hope that it complements the style rather than taking away from it. Something akin to the Netflix Gamera show, for example, and how they went about stylizing their monsters. But aside from the obvious good writing and animation, I actually feel where this reboot would need to be its strongest at would be its characters, updating them while at the same time making sure they stand out from one another, and not just be Ash clone from Pokemon. There needs to be substance to them, make their personalities bounce off each other well, and give them a real connection between each other and the villains. Make it personal, if you will, between the two differing sides and their ideologies when it comes to handling dinosaurs. And the same goes for the villains too, give them a reason to be invested in beating the D-Team beyond the obvious goal of stopping them from capturing dinosaurs. And of course, the villain that they would need to get right above all else would have to be Seth. With, in my opinion, using other more modern characters like Vigo from Race to the Edge as a frame of reference for how you make him a good villain, by being strong of course, but having his intelligence be his greatest strength, as he's able to beat everyone by simply outthinking them, with his ultimate demise coming at his own hubris. Unless they get the big villain right, I feel like this series will fall apart, because Seth is someone who's perfect for the role of manipulating things from behind the scenes, while also being an intimidating presence when on screen. But before we go on too long, we also need to ask ourselves the most important question of them all when it comes to a Dinosaur King reboot. That being, what reason would there be to reboot this franchise? Well, I feel like it's a golden opportunity. Dinosaurs are inherently popular as a topic to this day, plus Pokemon has kind of fallen off in recent years anime-wise, as Ash's story is now basically over. So if anything, it's the perfect time to reboot it, by not only taking advantage of the space left by Pokemon, but also expanding more on the recent popularity with anime in the modern age. But also, it would be a great opportunity to get new generations interested in paleontology and dinosaurs, while at the same time showing off some of the advancements we've made in our knowledge of these creatures. It could be the perfect opportunity to get people interested in a dinosaur franchise not related to Jurassic. Now, do I think this is ever going to happen? Absolutely not. Sega have completely abandoned this IP. But is it nice to wonder just what could have been? Yes, because this concept still has a lot of potential to be something truly special, I'd say. And if Sega won't acknowledge its brilliance, then screw it, I'm gonna acknowledge it here. But what do you guys think? If this video gets 500 likes, I'll make a part 2 where I reboot the Space Pirate saga, among other things I didn't have the opportunity to cover here. So if that's something you want to see in the future, then be sure to like this video and subscribe. And with that, peeps, it's been the Pink King here, and I will see you all next time.